Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
All right. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Hey, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for coming. I'm Mike Egan with our corporate affairs team. An honor to have all of you with us. And hey, just a quick announcement, a couple of events coming up. Hope you'll come back to this room Friday for lunch. We have political prognosticator Nate Silver is going to be joining us. Some of you know Nate Silver from his New York Times blog on Friday. So come back and join us Friday. Then coming up, a couple interesting other speakers. Rourke Denver, a Navy SEAL. He's actually the one that trains all the other Navy SEALs, is coming next week. And then following him, we have Gavin Newsom, Lieutenant Governor of California, who's talking about digital government, how to transform government into the digital age. And then finally, we'll wrap up the month with General Stanley McChrystal. So I think a great couple of speakers coming up. So we really want to thank Laura, Deb, everybody at Kim Ricketts Books and everybody else. And thank you certainly to Room to Read. An honor to have John with us today, but certainly no one better to give that intro than our Vice President for our worldwide public sector in charge of education. Please welcome Anthony Salcido. Anthony.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike. So it's an honor to have an opportunity to welcome John. It's certainly one of the great things about working at Microsoft is we get to see and hear from thought leaders from around the world in various capacities who come visit campus. Just a couple of weeks ago, Sal Khan was here. Any of you see his presentation here? So I would put John in that category, and someone who's leaving maybe a commercial or sort of a life in business to make a difference in the world of education. And for those of you who follow a lot of political talks that come here, understand that education is one of the most important priorities for government leaders around the world, partly because technology has created opportunity to really transform lives in a big way and scale impact you can have to information, as well as create opportunities for driving workforce change. Now, many of you understand John's history, know that he was a Microsoft employee and did a lot of work in the Asia-Pacific region for Microsoft and made a commitment and a choice to leave Microsoft to make a difference and make an impact in the world. Now, all of us, some of us, like myself, I'm lucky to have the opportunity to help in education while working at Microsoft. But in many cases, there's big dreams ahead, and John will share a little bit of his story. Room to Read focuses on, and John will say this better, but focusing on digital literacy and gender equality in many parts of the world, and specifically in Asia and Africa. This is a critical area where technology can make a difference. So it's a great conversation. It's a meaningful topic. It reflects not only the work that we have to do as a company in Microsoft to make a difference in education, but some of the ways in which the world is fundamentally changing, and an opportunity for us to bring thought and support to organizations like Room to Read is critical. So I urge you to pick up a book, to learn more about the foundation. If you don't already know it, pick up the sticker. Use your give dollars wisely to help Room to Read if that's something that you're interested in doing. I certainly do that myself, and I urge you to consider it as well as you make your giving decisions for the year. But without further ado, let me introduce John Wood from Room to Read.
For those of you who don't know about Room to Read, I want to talk a bit about who we are, what we do, update you on our results, which are earth-shattering, and then talk a little bit about the new book and tell you a few stories from the new book. And then, knowing that dialogue is always more interesting than monologue, we'll go to some dialogue and do some Q&A. Our mission at Room to Read is very simple, but our goal is very, very bold. Our mission has always been from the beginning, and I used to work in marketing, and I always think that when you do marketing, you got to say what you mean and mean what you say. And in our case, it's very simple. It's these 6 words. We believe there's no better way to change the future for kids across the poorest parts of the world than through the lifelong gift of education. Obviously, all of us here being at Microsoft, you're a hyper-educated audience. But without education, you're not you. Without education, I'm not me. And our goal is to reach kids all across the poorest parts of the world to help them to also get a chance to be the first in their family to get literate, to get educated, to finish secondary school. Our goal has always been very bold. I think I was very lucky to join Microsoft in 1991 when the idea of a computer on every desk and in every home was considered to be a bold, unattainable goal. And now here we are being way, way over that goal. When I started Room to Read, when I left Microsoft in 1999, originally I set the goal of reaching 10 million children by the year 2020. I believe very much in my favorite Ballmerism was, go big or go home. And I very much, when I said if I'm going to quit this world-leading technology company to devote my life to something, I want to go big, or I want to go home. And so originally 10 million kids by 2020 was the goal. I'm proud to say that in our current trajectory, we're actually going to reach 10 million children by the year 2015. The train will arrive in the station 5 years early. So we're really excited about that. And then that's going to let us take a deep breath, then figure out what comes next in year 16, 17, 18, 19 of our life cycle. Some of you may have read my first book. One of the reasons I love this title, Leaving Microsoft to Change the World, is that I got this title before Bill could get this title for his autobiography. So I hope that one day we can license the IP to him and he can write version 2. But seriously, it was a really interesting time for us after the book launched, because the book just kind of picked up a lot of momentum and a lot of energy and got read by a lot of people who are well connected, a lot of people who have resources, a lot of companies. And as a result of that, we've been able to grow incredibly quickly. Room to Read in 2006 was already bigger than I ever thought it would be, but we really set off this incredible growth tsunami after this book came out and after Bill Clinton endorsed it and after Oprah had me on the show and did Oprah's book drive for Room to Read, which was really exciting. Oprah raised over $3 million for us through Oprah's book drive, which was really exciting. And as a result of that, we've really grown substantially in all of our programs. So many of you may know we really have two pillars of what we do. Literacy, which encompasses building libraries, printing local language books, expanding the access to schools for kids who are out of school, and gender equality in education. And the gender equality part is really important because 2/3 of those in the world today who are illiterate are girls and women. And it's a simply staggering number. Over 200 million children woke up this morning and did not go to school in the developing world. 200 million. I mean, think about how many Microsoft campuses that is of bright young minds who could get educated. About 780 million people in the world today lack basic literacy. 2/3 of those are girls and women. And if we can change that, we can change the future forever. I think you can look around this room and recognize that when the world is full of a generation of educated, butt-kicking women, that's when things really start to change, right? Yeah! Yeah, there you go, thank you. So we've got 20,000 girls in our program today who hopefully will be future educated, butt-kicking women who will go out and change things. Now at Room to Read, I've got to be very clear, we're not anti-boy. As a former boy myself, I would never want to be accused of that. When we open schools and libraries, they're open to both genders, both boys and girls. But in the developing world, quite often, you have more boys showing up than girls because families who can afford to only educate one child send the eldest son. I'm super proud of this, and actually a lot of people at Microsoft have actually gathered together in work groups and said, okay, let's break a school down. It's $35,000 to build a school. Let's break that down and have 10 of us each contribute a certain amount of payroll deductions per month, and then have Microsoft match it, and bingo, work groups have funded schools. We've now opened 1,600 schools across the developing world. This is way faster than I ever could have imagined. Over the last 5 years on average, we've opened a new school every 36 hours somewhere in the developing world. So we really are making a lot of progress against our goal of making a dent in those numbers of kids out of school, kids who are illiterate. A long ways to go, but a good down payment on a dream. In the last couple of years, we've invested much more heavily than ever before in making sure that the teachers and the librarians have also gone through Room to Read professional development. Over 20,000 teachers have now worked with Room to Read to upskill themselves in areas like literacy, running a high-quality library, convincing kids to take the books home to read, and getting kids in a habit of reading. But the number I'm most excited about is this next one. Room to Read started in 1999 when I went back to Bahundanda, Nepal, where that first headmaster had showed me an empty library. 450 kids who were really eager to read, who did not have children's books in their library. And I opened that first library with my 73-year-old father as my unpaid right-hand man. And now here we are today, having scaled up to about 15,000 libraries open around the world. In the last 5 years, we've averaged a new library every 4 hours. We're opening 6 new libraries a day across the developing world. The average library reaches at least 400 children. So about 2,500 kids per day are being reached by Room to Read, and that's one of the reasons that Microsoft's support of our work is so important, because we just want to keep growing the number of kids we've served. We want to keep growing the number of books in circulation. We're not Luddites, but we're pretty old-fashioned about the fact that when you work in the developing world and there's no electricity and they're not on the data grid, you got to start somewhere with literacy, and a lot of it starts here, where kids have books in their mother tongue and are learning to read from a young age. So 12 million books circulating. The reason I love this statistic, and as you can tell at Room to Read, I learned well under Microsoft and under Ballmer. data, 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 data. We were just constantly collecting data and analyzing it. But when Leaving Microsoft to Change the World was released in 2006, the last chapter of that book was titled The Millionth Book. And it was all about hitting this magical milestone of the millionth book donated. We're now 12x that number in just the last 6 years. So our growth just continues to go up, and we're really excited about that. 7.5 million kids across 10 countries in Africa, South Asia, and Southeast Asia now have access to our schools, to our libraries, and to our girls' education program. So we're about 3/4 of the way to our goal of reaching 10 million children. So it's gone faster than I ever could have expected, and I'm really, really gratified. What my hope is that this book, which was released just 11 days ago, will hopefully take Room to Read to a whole new level. If you look at those numbers of what we've done in the last 6 years since the first book was released, my sincere and humble hope is that this book will hopefully set off a whole new tidal wave of support for Room to Read and get our story to be better known. Penguin is releasing the book. They're getting behind it in a big way, and we're doing a 25 or 26 story city book tour. So hopefully we're going to be able to get a lot more people involved. If you are tweeting, by the way, I'm at John Wood RTR, and RTR, of course, stands for Room to Read, but at John Wood RTR. 363,000 followers, not bad for an ex-Microsoft guy, but still a long ways to go. Now, a lot of people, kind of scratch their chin and ask us, how have you achieved these results? How have you gotten that many schools built? How have you gotten that many libraries open? And for me, a lot of it stems from this whole idea that Room to Read has that you can't help people if they don't want to help themselves. Everything Room to Read does is under a community co-investment model, where the community members are coming out and actually working on the projects and having their own skin in the game. It could be parents who donate bags of grain from their farm, and those bags of grain are sold off and turned into cash, which is then used to help buy the bricks, buy the mortar. It could be parents coming out and donating sweat equity to each project. We challenge the governments, and we work closely with the ministries of education in every country we work in to say, we need the ministry to agree to provide well-trained teachers and pay their ongoing salaries, and provide librarians and pay their ongoing salaries. So everything Room to Read does is a three-part agreement between us, the local community, and the Ministry of Education. And that's important because A, it stretches the dollar much further. B, it means we only work with motivated communities, those who have skin in the game. And C, it's going to make the projects much more sustainable because the local people have buy-in. And I think this is important because so much aid to the developing world is basically just an aid dump. Right? People go in and dump used t-shirts, governments go in and dump surplus grain, and really treat the developing world as passive aid recipients. Well, we don't look at it that way at all. We know from our travels, we know from our local teams that parents are the same everywhere. They want their kids to have a better life than they've had. And that almost always means, as Anthony pointed out, education, education, education. Ask any parent in the developing world what do they most want for their kids. Number one answer is always education. And the good news is they're willing to work for it. I have more shots than I can possibly show you of hard-working local community members coming out, carrying the bags of sand from the riverside up to their village to mix into the cement, parents coming out to dig the foundation for their new school. I love this photo because it's one of several that I have in my collection where we had a classic problem during the groundbreaking. We ran out of shovels. We had more parents than we had shovels. What a great problem to have, a very easy problem to remedy. And I love these shots from Laos, one of the poorest countries. Has anybody been to Laos? One of the poorest countries in the world, one of the poorest countries in Asia. But these are usually dirt roads. During the monsoon season, they turn to mud roads. The vehicles get stuck bringing in the building supplies. What do? Do they take a break? Do they decide to wait till the dry season? Do they try to call a tow truck, which is not, good luck in Laos calling a tow truck? Nope. They come out, they get in the mud, they roll up their sleeves, they lay down some logs, they get the vehicle over that muddy patch, they pick the logs back up and move on to the next muddy patch. That's how hard the people in the developing world are willing to work when Room to Read challenges them to say, we want to help you, but we only want to help you if you want to help yourself. So if you are a Room to Read investor, I hope you'll be proud of the fact of knowing that the local communities are investing side by side with you, like you see here as the very, very happy result. One of my favorite chapters to write in the new book, which is on sale in the back, I should point out. Yeah? Still on sale in the back? Good. One of my favorite chapters to write in this new book was titled Searching for Seuss. How many of you grew up as Dr. Seuss fans? How many of you have kids who love J.K. Rowling, or how many of teenagers who love the Hunger Games? Well, we discovered early on that one of the biggest needs that we had was to find more books in the mother tongue. And we learn this because we survey and we collect data on everything we do. And in 2004, we did a study that went out and asked the little people, asked our customers, how are we doing? What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? And so we asked the students, what would cause you to use our libraries more often? Longer hours, open at night, open on weekends. Number one answer, 52% of kids said, I want more books in the mother tongue, in this case Nepalese and Vietnamese. Well, that seems kind of like duh, right? Of course kids want to be able to read in their mother tongue. They want to learn other languages, but if you learn to read in your mother tongue first, you're going to be much better off academically. The challenge is that you can't actually find the Dr. Seuss of the developing world because the people are poor, living on $1 a day or $2 a day. So the for-profit publishers don't publish books for children in those languages. So you can make a list as long as my arm of languages where you actually don't have a properly functioning book market for children because there's no financial incentive. But if you look at the supply chain of poverty, 780 million people illiterate, a lot of that goes back to the fact that kids don't have books in their mother tongue, or at least they didn't until we decided that we would become a publisher. And what we thought we would do is, it would have been fun to try to translate There's a Wocket in My Pocket into the Khmer language. That probably could have taken weeks or months of fun. It would have been fun to translate Harry Potter into Zulu and Xhosa and Setswana. But what we decided to do instead was actually find local authors and local artists who could produce original children's work that kids could really relate to. And this is important to us because there's no sense really in translating a book about the White Christmas and giving it to kids in Zambia who can then be confused about caroling and eggnog in the fireplace, right? Or a book about mom driving up in her Volvo station wagon to the split-level ranch house and the kids in South African townships are like, well, who are those people? What are they doing? What we wanted to do instead was work with local authors and local artists to produce high-quality children's work. And so we literally have searched for Seuss. And what I want to show you here, I think we've found not just the Dr. Seuss of Nepal, not just the J.K. Rowling of Cambodia. We found dozens and dozens of really talented local authors and local artists, and Ribbon Read has become their marketplace, not just for their ideas and their creativity and their imaginations, but also they know they're part of the solution, because now they know that millions of kids across the developing world are reading their books. We've produced literally hundreds of titles. I'm not going to show you all hundreds of them, but I want to show you 50 books in 50 seconds. And what I want you to think about for a minute is pretend that you're not you. Pretend that you're a 7-year-old girl in post-Khmer Rouge Cambodia, or a 9-year-old boy in a township of Mpumalanga province in rural South Africa. And there's a certain day when your library opens in your school. It's one of 6 that open that day. Not in your school, but one of 6 around the world that open that day. And you stream in through the door, this new portal of knowledge to fire your imagination. Here's what you see, 50 books in 50 seconds. Enjoy. So what do you think? We found them? We found the J.K. Rowling, we found the Dr. Seuss. We're insanely excited about this program, and for those of you who are worried about the plight of the lost baby elephant, I want to assure you that all of our books definitely have happy endings, okay? So don't go home worried about whether the baby elephant found his mother. For us, our happy ending is that we've now produced 850 original titles using local authors and local artists. Because we can print thousands and thousands and thousands of copies of these books, we now actually control much more of the distribution supply chain than we would otherwise. So we can put literally millions of books into our schools. We have something going on now called the Checkout Challenge. So if you are a Ribbon Read supporter and you donate during book tour the next 2 months, our board's going to match the first $1 million donated, dollar for dollar for dollar. So it's fantastic because that's going to allow us to produce the next 150 original titles. That'll get us to over 1,000 original titles, a milestone I never thought I would hit. And the beautiful thing about it is it's literally $1 equals 1 book. It's such a simple equation to change a kid's life forever, $1, 1 book. So I tell another story in a book that I love. Actually, there's a couple of people in the audience who actually know some of our team in Bangladesh, so they will actually like this story. I talk a lot about GSD, which, as all of you know, working at Microsoft, there's a G-rated version and an R-rated version, and G-rated version is get stuff done. The R-rated version is slightly different. But it's really a key part of our DNA, and I feel lucky I got to work here as long as I did, because I learned a lot about the fact that you're not judged by where you went to school, you're not judged by your title, you're judged by how much stuff did you get done that day, that week, that month. And for me, getting stuff done is really a core part of the DNA of the entire organization of Room to Read, and it's so needed in the social sector to say stop talking about the problem and start acting on the solution. Room to Read is all about acting on the solution. A story from Bangladesh that I just loved was our country director, Zaki Hassan, when he started out. And it's important to point out that all of our results are because we have really strong local teams. We're not sending American expats overseas to go boss the local people around. We have strong teams in each country who are local, who understand the local customs and the local language. Well, Zaki and his team went out to survey these river islands that are called the Chars. It's the poorest, most marginalized land in an otherwise already poor country. But this is very silty land, and the rivers go low and the rivers go high during the wet season, and the land and the terrain are constantly changing. Well, the team could not find a single girl on any one of the 13 Chars they went to who had ever finished secondary school. Not a single girl. Now think about that. How does your society develop if girls don't finish secondary school and if kids don't have educated mothers? How do you defeat misogyny if kids don't grow up with an educated mother? The best thing in the world to teach kids not to be sexist or not to be racist or not to be misogynistic is to all go to school side by side. Well, why did the girls not go to school? Well, Amy who knows geography knows very well. What does Bangladesh sit right underneath? The Himalayas. Right, so all that snow melt and all that glacier melt's got to go somewhere. Well, it goes right through Bangladesh for several months. So what happens is these little rivulets become 3-kilometer wide rivers, 4-kilometer wide rivers, 5-kilometer wide rivers, very, very fast moving. So the kids, of course, they don't have motorboats, they don't have jet skis, they can't get off these little islands, and so the kids miss several months of school. And then they have to drop out because they don't pass their exam to go to the next grade. Well, fortunately for us, Zaki and his team are very action-oriented, very solution-oriented, and they came up with an innovation that is inexpensive, low-tech, something you can implement immediately. And as a chapter of my book, one of my favorite chapters to write was called Boat to Read. It was a new innovation from Room to Read that was very, very simple. The idea being that you can take these fishing boats, you can charter them for a couple of months, you can modify them, you can put a little library on them even and have books inside. And so these kids get picked up every day to go to school during the rainy season for several weeks. And the rule of thumb on the Boat to Read is you're not gossiping, you're studying, you're reading. You're going to extend the school day by the very nature of being on the Boat to Read. And I love that story because I think sometimes people make things so complicated in the world about how are you going to go out and create change. And sometimes the change actually is fairly easy to achieve. Sometimes the change is right there in front of you as a very, very simple solution. Another chapter in the book I wrote, which I really enjoyed writing, was called The War on Overhead. How many of you have ever suffered through a mid-year review meeting or a budgeting meeting where you have to justify every single dollar you're spending? Like 6 of you? What happened to this company? Come on, more than that. So I know myself that I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to cut expenses, how to increase revenue, how to basically run things like a business. And one of the things I wanted to do at Room to Read was to take that same private sector mentality of cost cutting and being efficient and take it to the social sector. One of the first things we did was we came up with a rule that was very simple. It was called the No Land Rover rule. And the idea behind it was simple. Why spend all this money on things like air-conditioned Land Rovers when you can actually get around and use pickup trucks or motorbikes or public buses or whatever it might be and not spend money on wasteful things that keep you from getting the job done? Who in this room, I'm going to do a little quiz. Who in this room is good at math? Okay, sir, what's your name? Herman? Yes. Herman. Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot. Hey, man, you raised your hand. Come on. Okay, everybody give a cheer for Herman for volunteering. All right, Herman. A new Land Rover costs $75,000. Okay? That's your numerator. Are you with me? Okay? In Cambodia, let's say. 1 year of girls' education costs, let's start with an easy one. A book costs $1 to print. How many Khmer language books can we not print this year if we buy one Land Rover? 75,000. Great. Okay, you're 1 for 1. Now it gets complicated. A year of a girl's scholarship costs $250 per girl per year. How many girls don't go to school this year in Cambodia if we buy one Land Rover?
75,000 times 4.
75,000 divided by 250. 300. 300 girls. How many girls don't go to school this year if we buy 10 and fill our parking lot full of them? 3,000. How many girls don't go to school in 10 countries if we buy 10 per country? 30,000. Literally, that's the stakes we're playing for. So we decided, let's figure out a way to cut costs. And one of the things we do is go to our corporate partners to say, help us find ways to save money. Microsoft, help us find ways to use your world-class software without paying for it. I write in the book about being in a board meeting with one of our board members, a Goldman banker, and he was telling me that he had racked up 3 million miles on American Airlines. He'd been traveling so much. And I rubbed my hands together greedily and I said, well, what's your password? I need into that account. So he gave me his password and I ran him down from 3 million miles to 0 over the course of 5 years. His Starwood points, ran them down to 0. And I mentioned that at a Barclays conference, and a bunch of Barclays bankers said, well, we're competitive with Goldman. We're going to match Goldman frequent flyer mile for frequent flyer mile. And now Barclays has given us over 3 million frequent flyer miles to fly around the world for free. Credit Suisse gives us free office space in London, a very expensive place to have an office. But you want to raise pounds because they're a strong currency. Office space donated by Credit Suisse in Tokyo, in Hong Kong, in Sydney. The Financial Times hosted our inaugural New York office with 10 desks. So we're trying to do everything we can to cut costs. Nikki, who's sitting over here in this row, just closed a really big deal with Lenovo. 500 laptops donated by Lenovo so that every Room to Read employee will have a brand new laptop. Now think about that. What's a Lenovo laptop cost? Let's say it's 1,000, right? Every laptop means 4 girls can go to school. Every laptop means 1,000 additional books can get printed. Now we're looking for more software donations. Every one of those Lenovo laptops is going to need to have world-class Microsoft Office and Windows software. We would prefer not to pay for it. So if you have any ideas for how we could do that, Nikki's sitting right over there. You know where to find us. But that, for us, is a key part of our DNA of always trying to find ways to cut the costs. Hilton gives us 150 free room nights a year as part of our corporate partnership with them. So if you have friends anywhere in the business world, remind them of this, that Room to Read now deploys 83 cents on the dollar directly to programs because our overhead is so low. Charity Navigator, which is the rating agency for charities, has given us 4 stars, their highest ranking, for 7 consecutive years. Only 2% of NGOs based in America can make that claim. And a lot of that is because of this whole no Land Rover rule, then spilling over into finding more and more and more creative ways to save money. Now, one of the key things about Microsoft that I loved about working here is whenever Microsoft saw a frontier market or an opportunity, it would just go after it, all guns blazing. And I like the fact that in the private sector, when they see opportunity, they scale. They hire, they train, they set targets, they get budgets, they motivate, and they go, go, go. Well, one of my goals in starting Room to Read was to say, well, if the world needs a good latte, the world damn well needs literacy. So if we could scale as quickly as Starbucks could scale, what would that mean for the world? Now, I was told that was a crazy goal because Starbucks, of course, pays more money, gives their employees stock options, gives them larger bonuses, has all kinds of reasons they can access efficient capital markets like the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ to get the capital they need to grow. So this is absolutely a crazy goal. How could a little startup NGO open libraries more quickly than Starbucks opens outlets? Well, data doesn't lie. This shows Starbucks post-IPO new outlets in green, Room to Read new libraries in blue, our first 12 years. The evidence is there. It's clear. We can actually out Starbucks, and indeed by year 5 and 6, we were out Starbucking Starbucks. And like 2 of you air clapped for that, so thank you for the air clap. We're really excited about that. Let me, in closing, just give you one of my favorite stories that actually did not make it into the book. I just didn't know how to actually write this story in prose. It can only really be told in photographs. So I'm going to close with this. This story is about a little boy in India who was reading in one of our libraries. And as our team saw him wearing this medal, they asked him about where he had gotten the medal. Why was he wearing this? And the boy responded by scampering away. He ran off and they thought, oh no, we've scared this young man. And one of the teachers said, no, you have not scared him. He's very proud that you're asking him about his medal. He won that for being in a school play. And he's run home to get his costume. He's going to come back and show you his costume. So about 10 minutes later, the boy came back with his skeptical grandmother kind of, swatting him on the butt, saying, what are you doing skipping school? And the students had read a book in their library about the Great Salt March, under which Gandhi led the movement to liberate India from the British. And so these kids then decided that they would, of course, reenact the Salt March. So this is Gandhi Ji. This is our young friend after he's stripped off the medal and come back in his Gandhi Ji costume. And of course, school just ground to a halt for the day because now the kids got the adults interested, the room to read staff's interested, so they've got to basically reenact their reenactment of the Great Salt March. So here they are reenacting their reenactment. And I love this story because, number one, Gandhi Ji is one of 7.5 million children who now have access to room to read schools and libraries and literacy programs. And think about that one example of the one little boy whose imagination is fired, multiply that by 7.5 million. That's the impact that Room to Read is starting to have. And what I love about this photo is, kids are always good at improvising, and this kid obviously borrowed his Gandhi Ji glasses from Michael Phelps. This is I don't know if you can see that very well, but he's literally wearing swim goggles. But so for me, I think the best part of doing what I do now is just meeting the kids all around the world. This young chap I met him in a room to read library in the Mekong Delta in Vietnam the day the library opened. And we were talking about, I was asking about, was he excited? This is the first day, you get to start reading books. And he told me that he'd actually snuck into the library the night before. He had climbed in through a window with a flashlight. And he excitedly told me, Mr. John, I read 9 books last night. And just was fired up. This young boy, Jairus, I met last summer while in Zambia. And I asked him, he was a 13-year-old learning to read, reading books on a regular basis in a room to read library. And I asked him, what would you like to be, Jairus, when you grow up? He seemed like a very smart kid. And he said, I would like to be the first Zambian to ever be Secretary General of the United Nations. And I was like, wow, okay, that's a pretty good goal. And he said, but first I must build my resume first. I must have other jobs before I do that. And I said, well, Jairus, what do you think would be an interim step between here, 13-year-old in a rural village in the back of Beyond, and Secretary General? And he said, well, I will first be president of Zambia. That will be my interim step to being Secretary General of the UN. And I love that story because it sounds kind of implausible, right? But then about 3 months later, I was at the United Nations when Ban Ki-moon and Gordon Brown announced their whole Education First initiative to make universal primary something that we pay a lot more attention to at the government and the United Nations level. And Ban Ki-moon told a story about growing up in post-war South Korea, saying that the village he was from was so devastated that school was outdoors. The teacher had a stick and would draw in the dirt, and that was their chalkboard, was the dirt. And then one day, Ban Ki-moon said that all these books showed up. And the teachers were excited, and the students were excited, and the kids opened the books. And on the inside front cover of the book, it said, this book is a gift from the United Nations. Anybody getting chills? That kid learning outside with a stick and the dirt and books supplied by the United Nations is now the UN Secretary General. From a society that has used education as the rising tide that has lifted all boats, so that South Korea is an economic powerhouse. So I don't think Jairus' story or his ideas are actually very implausible. I think it's actually possible for these kids to do that. In closing, these are just a few of my favorite shots of some of the kids we've met over the years of our travels. And a lot of times now people ask me kind of what's next for Room to Read? What do you want to do? Do you have another big, hairy, audacious goal? And I think for us, we really view this as being possibly life-altering and life-changing. Archimedes said, give me a lever long enough and I can move the earth. And I believe that if we all look at our own family backgrounds, there was some relative somewhere who had that lever, who got families out of poverty. Our simple goal for the coming 3 or 4 decades is to be part of a global movement and to help lead it. And that global movement is going to be all about one thing. It's about saying that never again should any child be told you were born in the wrong place, at the wrong time, to the wrong parents, and you therefore did not get educated, and you will therefore remain in perpetual poverty. We believe that notion belongs in the scrap heap of human history. We believe that with your support, we can continue to move towards putting it there. In the same way there have been movements against apartheid and slavery and movements for women to get the vote, and there's movements today to vaccinate every child, we believe in a global movement that says no more wrong place, wrong time. It should be right place, right time, because we were there for you. So I will close with that and leave you with one final thought. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. We're going to do a little Q&A, but for those who have to go or those who have egregious schedules today, we have done an express lane with the books. There's about 30 pre-signed books, so if you don't want to wait around to get it signed, you don't have to. I would ask you one quick thing. If you like this and you like the story, I would ask you just to do one thing. Get a couple of extra books, distribute them out to your teammates, and say, hey, come on. Let's do something. Let's get a library built. Let's fund 10 girls. This is not a fundraising event, so I don't want to turn it into one, but I want to plant that seed with you. This is only possible because so many people at Microsoft have supported Room to Read over the years, and we don't want to slow down. We want to accelerate. So if you just think about the fact that every dollar is being matched by our board, but every dollar you give is also being matched by Microsoft, so every dollar that you can get your teammates to give will actually be quadrupled. Your dollar becomes 2 from Microsoft, becomes 4 due to our board match. So it's not hard to go do something today that's going to get a lot of things done. So if you want to give the book out to a few teammates and challenge them, we would love that. We would welcome that. For those who have to go, no worries. For those who can stay, we'll do about 5 minutes of Q&A, and then I'll hang out and answer any individual questions. Also, a few of our team members are here. If our team members can raise their hand if you want to meet any of the Room to Read team from the San Francisco and New York offices. There's 5 of them here. So anyway, any questions or comments? Hi.
Can you talk about your scholar program?
Yeah, the idea behind the girls' education program is to work in places that have historically had very low rates of girls finishing secondary school. In some of the parts of Zambia we work in, as an example, 4 out of 5 girls don't make it past 7th grade. So the idea is to give them everything they need to succeed, and that includes the obvious stuff like school fees, uniforms, book bags, school supplies, less obvious things like bicycles if they live very far away from school. And then also we have what we call life skills coaching, which works with the girls to get the skills they'll need to negotiate key life decisions. So for girls in Zambia, for example, it is how to not get pregnant, why you probably don't want to get married at age 13 or 14 or 15 and drop out of school, what kind of career you might have, what does self-confidence mean, what does a life map look like, how do you develop a savings plan. So for us, it started as kind of pure academic support, but we then grew those life skills components also as we wanted to make sure the girls, when they got out of school, were ready to negotiate life decisions. Now, is it working? Well, we're very data-based and very evidence-based. The Gates Foundation actually funds all of our evaluations so we can go test the efficacy. And last year we did a survey and found out that 64% of the girls who have finished secondary school with Room to Read support are now enrolled in university and tertiary education, even though we can't pay a dime for it. So we're really excited about that, and that's obviously how a middle class starts to form. Hi.
Hi, this is a fairly big question, and I know we don't have very much time, but I'm wondering, I was really struck by the story of the girl named Malala, a 15-year-old girl in Pakistan who was assaulted for suggesting that women be able to read in her area.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what your thoughts are on situations around the world where girls are not encouraged to read for cultural reasons or religious reasons, and what you see as the right approach there.
Yeah, well, I think if you take a long-term view of it, I think a lot of the approach is that, in my view, boys and girls should go to school side by side from a young age, and that's why we don't build single gender schools. I know myself growing up, I think if boys were to go to school side by side with girls, and if every boy was to have an educated mother, I think a lot of this resistance would melt away. Because if you think about like any of us in this audience who have educated mothers, any of us in this audience who went to school and watched girls succeed and in many cases kick our butts academically, it's hard to then tell that young man, women are inferior, you should treat women badly. I mean, if you grew up with an educated mother and you grew up side by side with girls doing well in school, I think that's not the only solution, but I think it's a real key part of the solution. I also tell you that a lot of people ask us, doesn't Room to Read get a lot of resistance to what we do? And I will tell you that I don't know what the word is, it's the opposite of resistance, but we have the opposite. Every time we announce our new plan for school construction, for libraries, for the girls' education program, we are oversubscribed in a huge way by communities that want it, and we just have to have the capital so we can say yes to them rather than saying no. Let's do one more, and then I'm happy to do the rest during the book signing. Hi.
Hey. So first, thanks so much for coming to talk to us. You're a real inspiration to me, and I'm sure to a lot of people. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about what the involvement Room to Read is after you open schools and after you give books and after you open libraries. And how do you guys get involved, and how do you track really your long-term impact in the world?
Yeah, why don't I have one of my team members talk to you about that, because that's a very long, complicated answer. I can give you the short answer, which is basically, it's just like Reagan said about Gorbachev, trust but verify. We trust that the schools are going to remain open because the communities have invested in them and the government's supporting them, but we verify by hiring outside evaluators who make random unannounced spot checks on the libraries and the schools, and they just calculate data. All that data goes up into Salesforce. They give us unlimited usage of Salesforce. So every school, every library is tracked in Salesforce, and we then compile the statistics and find out 98% of the libraries are still functioning even after they become independent. 98% of the libraries have checkout systems in place. 96% of our girls passed last year to the next grade. So a lot of it is getting the baseline conditions right by making sure that the communities are co-investing, but then a lot of it is also making sure that we're going back and actually tracking what's happening. But any of our team members can give you even more complex thing than that. I'll also say that on roomtoread.org, you can find all of our evaluations along with 6 years of financials. We're a really transparent organization. With our evaluations, we don't blackline the bad stuff and then post it online. We post online warts and all the state of the world. Here's where we're strong, here's where we're weak, and we're going to run a very transparent organization. So again, I'm happy to sign books, and please don't be shy about getting your coworkers involved. And again, thank you for coming out today.